and boom goes the dynamite.
Welcome to another edition of the only live Monday through Friday lacrosse talk show. This is the Daily Dive. I'm your host, Michael Karvelis. To everyone on the West Coast, good morning. To everyone on the East Coast, good afternoon. It's time for lunch and lacrosse talk. The Mammoth defeat the Roughnecks 8-7. We're going to get to that, but we're also going to get to Cooper Perkins in our Fanatics Big Guest segment. We'll ask him about the Seals upset they suffered last week at the hands of the Mammoth. And then, of course, in our B-Rams Coffee Company Code Daily Dive Last Brew segment, we'll get to the Rock and the Bandits, and we'll also give a Game 2 pick for the Mammoth and the Roughnecks. Go to Daily Dive Lax on social media and click the link tree, and then click our store to shop the best merchandise with this logo on it. The Mammoth defeat the Roughnecks 8-7. And in case you're wondering how Calgary fans or Roughnecks are feeling in general, here is how their coach explained things, if you will. Let me get to this right here. Liar! Sore losing liar. So here's the interesting thing about what I just showed you guys. The Calgary Roughnecks scored 7 goals. I'll repeat that. The Calgary Roughnecks scored 7 goals. So you're telling me that it was because the Mammoth had power plays that the Roughnecks could not score more than 7 goals. You're telling me that holding and delay of game and throwing your stick at somebody, you're telling me those are all just the refs being stupid, right? Because forget what Tanner Cook did. You can have a makeup call for that, like when he got mauled. How about when Tanner Cook went like this and threw a stick at somebody? That's worse than getting mauled by the goal. But getting mauled by the goal. That was a complete Bush League move by that idiot, and I hope he apologizes for doing that crap. But yeah, the referees, let me tell you, those referees, every time someone loses in sports, it's always about the referees. You know, the referees did that. Bull crap. You lost. Get over it. Get better. This game was not even that good. You know, I'm still looking for Jesse King to score because, I mean, what, he had 2 assists? That's great. And Tyler Pace didn't play me because Tyler Pace, just because he had a good last game doesn't mean he has to be the reason you guys lost. Just find things to blame besides the fact that you guys screwed up. Remember when Panther City last week got all these penalties called against them? They didn't moan and complain, did they? They lost, and they took it like men. Maybe this bum coach from Calgary should step up a little bit and take some accountability. Stupid. Blame the referees. What kind of coach are you? Here's how you should have responded to that thing, okay? I'm going to go to the Calgary Roughnecks Twitter page again, and I'm going to get to something that you guys should have heard from that coach. Well, apparently the coach did not give the team motto this year. I don't know if he got that sent to him on text message or anything, but I just find it very peculiar. Your team scores 7 goals, and you immediately go on a rampage about the referees like a casual fan. It just blows my mind. I'm not surprised that Roughnecks fans are doing it, but again, you scored 7 goals, and your offense did not look great. I mean, Del Bianco did his thing, but even then he was complaining. I'm just so tired of hearing about, I'm so tired of hearing about referees because there were so many other things that the Roughnecks did wrong than just, have 7 power plays against them. Maybe you don't commit penalties. Maybe, I don't know, that's just a thing. Again, getting mauled by the goal when you still have 7 goals at that point and then throwing your stick at somebody like a javelin is not a good way to get a makeup call later on. Shout out to Dan Taylor for what he said, but for Coach, was it Solosky or what? I'm not supporting that. Sorry, Roughnecks. I don't know how to tell you. You guys lost. You don't have to play the rest every single time. One bad call does not make an entire game. It's whatever. I'll tell you what. Another team that lost to this Mammoth team was the Seals, and that was not fun. But I'll tell you what, a great call and has been with the Seals all year is Cooper Perkins. We'll talk to him next and get his thoughts on the Mammoth, the Seals, and the upcoming offseason. We'll be right back. Daily Dive. Welcome back to Daily Dive. We're joined by a relaxed version of Cooper Perkins. How are you, Cooper?
You said it well, buddy. I'm relaxed. The stressful part of the season's over, so now we just get to be a fan for the most part.
That's a good point. And I just want to let you know, once again, great call in that game. I know it was a tough loss, but you have some of the best calls out there, and that was a great game for your voice. So I just want to give credit for you on that one.
Really appreciate that. We got treated to what was an elite sporting event. That's not just a great lacrosse game. It was one of the best sporting events you'll ever get to watch, whether it's on TV or in person. And, based on what my affiliation looks like, it's disappointing. Obviously would have liked to get to call a couple more games here and there, but at the end of the day, you can't do anything other than tip your hat and just be thrilled with what that did for the game, right? Because we need games like that. We need events like that to help raise the profile of the league and try and confirm that whole thesis that all you need to do is get people in the building and then they'll be hooked forever. Well, if it's a game like that, that truly will be the case.
Agreed. And I do have to ask you this. I've seen, we raised a question on Twitter and most people seem fine with it, but Do you like the single elimination in round one? Because I think it's great that we do that first and then just go to best of 3. I think it's great.
I hate it, actually. Yeah, no, I've been pretty. I don't know if I've been on the record in any public space about this, but to anyone that I've talked to about it behind the scenes, the way I would do it if I got to decide was expand the playoffs, open up an additional spot, and have the 5 versus 4 play each other for the right to play the number 1. I think they should do an NBA style play in. I just don't, it doesn't sit well with me, the idea that you can be the best team for 18 games over 22 weeks and then it all comes down to 1 game, especially since the second round is 2 out of 3. It doesn't make sense. If you want to get as many butts in seats and as much ticket revenue as you can, then it only makes sense to expand the playoffs, get another team in there, have someone else get a home game, and then get a best 2 out of 3 in the first round. I think that would be better for deciding a true champion. It has the feel a little bit to me of a horrible hybrid between the baseball playoffs and the NBA playoffs. In the NBA, it feels like more often than not, the best team comes out. In baseball, it's a total crapshoot. It's random. You get to the playoffs and anything can happen. We kind of have the worst of both worlds, where in the first round, anything can happen. And then in the second round, the cream starts to rise to the top. Now, that doesn't mean that the eventual champion isn't the most deserving team. I think Colorado was the most deserving team last year. They got hot at the right time. They had all of the right pieces to be a playoff team. They reminded me a lot of like the 2012 LA Kings in the NHL, who came in as an 8 seed and just had all the pieces in place to be a really, really difficult playoff out. And they won the Stanley Cup that year. The Mammoth were kind of the same thing. Now, are they the same thing this year? Maybe. They have a lot of the same pieces returning. You could make a very clear case that nothing has changed there. But to answer your question, I'm not a fan of it at all. I really dislike it. Either it needs to all be 1 and done, or it needs to all be 2 out of 3 with a play-in kind of thing. You can't have a combination. The hybrid just doesn't make sense to me.
I like the play-in. I'll take that. I could deal with that. I just need a single game elimination somewhere, so I'll take the play-in if that becomes a thing in the future. We know it's all going to change, I'm sure, as the league grows. So I got to ask you, in that Seals loss, how did they fall short in your estimation from what you've seen from them all season and then what happened in that game?
I mean, I think it's pretty simple, right? They missed 4 breakaway opportunities. Credit to Dylan Ward for making big saves in those spots. But I think anytime you have a breakaway situation that's a 1-on-none, it's more on the offensive player to convert it than it is on the goalie to prevent it. So if they convert 2 out of those 3, they win the game, or 2 out of those 4, they win the game. If they convert 4 out of those 4, it's not that close. Dylan Ward played a phenomenal game as well. If he doesn't make 1 or 2 of the 6 incredible saves he does, there's a very real chance that they could have scored 20 in that game. I mean, they had their opportunities. Just looking at the way that he played between the net and some of the opportunities that they let fall by the wayside, and they still put up 12. They have no one to blame but themselves. Obviously they were very frustrated with the holding call at the end of the game. There's a very good case to be made that was completely erroneous. I don't have strong opinions on that because that's not my job. But I think when you break it all down, they lost because they didn't take advantage of enough of the opportunities that they had. The Mammoth played a great game. They played a really great first half, and then they survived in the second half. But San Diego had every opportunity to win that game, and they didn't. And sometimes that happens in sports where the team that puts themselves in position to succeed doesn't succeed. It doesn't mean that they were the better team. I think Colorado was better prepared for that moment, and it showed. They took advantage of the opportunities they had when they had them. They just didn't have as many opportunities, so they had to do it at a higher percentage rate than San Diego did, and they did that. But I think when it all comes back to is that's a team that, as good as they were, San Diego kind of underachieved. 14 wins is a huge accomplishment, but it still felt like they left something on the table, right? They weren't blowing teams out with the exception of Las Vegas the second last week of the regular season. They weren't having a lot of comfortable wins. And it didn't feel like until about 3 weeks left in the season that they really found that complete package. And, it's unfortunate that it ended in the first round because I think that they would have made for a really compelling West Conference final team, potentially NLL final team. I think they played great games and competitive, fun games every year, and that may have been good for the sport. But they lost because they didn't do enough. is what it all comes down to. Nothing took anything. No one took anything from them. No one robbed anything from them. They just didn't make it happen.
That's a good point. I like the sense of reason from you, because you're right. I mean, you get mad at the holding penalty, but you could also say that there were times and I think you came on the show and mentioned that there was you thought they were going to get hot later on. They did that, but of course you can't have the first half that they had, obviously. And
yeah, to your point, just real quick, you can't win a game in the first half, but you can certainly lose one. And they were about as close to losing a game in the first half as you can get.
I agree with that point. So I know you've also been on the show talking about Colorado at least once. You weren't the biggest faith in them. Maybe you're still not, especially after last night's debacle, if you will. But how good is Colorado looking at them in hindsight, or are we still kind of not believing it?
Colorado has an exceptional goalie and a few really good pieces and knows how to win. That plays really well in the postseason. And I guess I'll have to be the first one to eat crow and say that they're not going to win. They're not going to win first place, I guess, in any regular season the way that they're built. But when the games matter and matchups have a little bit more weight to them, right? That's when Zed Williams is at his best. That's when Dylan Ward's at his best. And it's a lot like that LA Kings team that for 3 years was between 4th and 8th in the West Conference and made the Western Conference Final every year and pushed it to 7 games. So it's not, there's a parallel there in other sports where the Mammoth aren't doing something that's unheard of. They still could have very easily missed the playoffs, which I don't think we should forget about. But hey, they're playing their best lacrosse at the best time. And I don't think we've seen the last of Calgary by any stretch. I think that series is absolutely going to go 3 games. I know just before I came on, you were kind of roasting Kurt a little bit for complaining. Here's the thing: that's gonna work in his favor. It's gonna work in his favor because NL officials are somewhat easily influenced, and he'll take whatever $200 fine it is. And I'd be surprised if they don't get a few calls in game 2. They'll also be, they'll be at home. That'll help them a lot. They're extremely dangerous. They're not going to have they're not going to be held to 7 goals twice, Right. So I think at the end of the day, we have a really compelling series ahead of us. But yeah, credit to Colorado. They've made me eat my words for 18 consecutive months. And at some point, either I'll be right or I'll just change my stance on them. But for now, I'm 100% wrong.
So I'm a Miami Heat fan in terms of like parallels with other sports. And we're one of those teams where it's like, why are we this good right now? It doesn't make any sense. They do all the little things right, but nothing like crazy good. So that's a good point that you made with the Kings and, of course, the Mammoth in general. San Diego's got an offseason coming up. We know they just stacked the decks this year, spent some money doing so from what I've heard. What are we looking at in the offseason, and what are the team vibes right now?
That is a tough one, man. I think that one's about as under lock and key as it comes. I think you'll see changes. I think you'll see some changes for sure, whether those are in player personnel, coaching staff, something in the middle, some combination of the two. I think it would be smart for them to change some things because there's a temptation to just run it back.
Right.
And they won 14 games. That temptation is going to be really, really strong. But at the end of the day, they had the pieces to maybe win 16. And they certainly had the pieces to be in the West Conference Final, if not the NL Finals altogether. I think if you asked anyone before the season, something less than a championship series appearance would have been considered a disappointment.
Right.
And that wasn't even thinking about the possibility of losing in the first round. Now, of course, the 1-game playoff, right? We just talked about this. Crazy stuff happens in 1 games. They could have been 16-2, and Colorado could have been 4-12 or 4-14, and still beat them, right? Like that happens in this league.
That's true.
I think there are going to be some changes, though, and I think that you could probably figure out some of them just off the top of your head, right? Like where were the square pegs in round holes? Like he played great in the play-in game or in the first round game, but Kevin Crowley did not produce. He didn't produce where they wanted him to, and I don't know if there are some changes that they're hoping he can make to come back next year, or if they want to move on. I have no idea. This is total hearsay and conjecture, but just as an observer, that didn't look like a peg that fit with what they were trying to do. Defensively, they have some areas they can shore up. I mean, what are they going to do with the goaltending? I don't know. Frank played a really good second half of the season and then was really average in the playoff game. Kind of was what they expect him to be. And Teddy and Pat talked about this all season. Do they have enough goaltending to win a championship? And ultimately, the answer was no. So how do you go about trying to shore that up? Do you just go run it back because there aren't a lot of good options available? Do you turn things over to the kid and hope that the future starts now, or do you go out and try and make a trade for a guy like Dougie Jameson or Zach Higgins? You know, someone who could potentially become available if the stars align. But I think it'll be I think it'll be about 75% the same. I think the big pieces will be back. I think Doby, Dixon, Berg, those guys will all be back. I think a big question is whether or not Brody's back. I would suspect if Brody's back as a player, he'll be back as a coach. I don't see him being away from things. I mean, he does have some coaching background already as the coach of Canada's Sixes team, so it's not to say that there isn't a lot of experience there. I think he'd bring a lot. It's just a question of whether he wants to keep playing or not. I don't know. I haven't talked to him about that. I doubt he knows. But I think there are some other areas, right, where guys are going to get older. Danny Logan's going to be a second-year player. What do they do on the fringes of the defense? Mike McCannell kind of tailed off towards the end of the season. Graydon Bradley played well, but is he towards his ceiling? That's tough to tell. They're just going to have to figure out what they want to do. But they also found some pieces that are going to take big steps next year. Jake Govett's going to be a really, really good player next year. You know, he had flashes this year. He brought a lot to the table, but I think they're going to expect him to contribute points next year, and he's going to be able to do that. So what does the changes look like? I think some of it will be pieces that are no longer a part of the fold, but I think also it's going to be a lot of role shuffling. The guys like the Jake Govetts who are going to be a bigger part next year. The guys like the Danny Logans who became a huge part as the season went on and are going to be the anchor next year. So are we going to see a wholesale different roster? Absolutely not. Are we going to see any big shocking departures? I don't really think so. It's a great organization with great people that takes care of their players and does everything they can to win. It's what you want to be a part of if you're a player, right? You don't want to front run just to whoever won the last championship. You want to be in a position to win the next one. And just because they fell short this year doesn't mean they're not in position to win the next one. So I think there will also be some interest from other pieces that are around the league. You know, I keep an eye on the defense market to see what comes available. Keep an eye on guys that have Toronto area connections, maybe Hill Academy connections, right? Because of the Merrill family. I think there are going to be some pieces that move around, and they won't be worse. They absolutely will not be worse on paper. The pieces might even fit better together next year. How they go about it doing that, I don't know. Patrick Merrill, I think, is the best general manager in the NLL. The on-the-floor results haven't necessarily backed that up, but the way he has navigated the offseason the last 2 years, not just the big fish signings, right? Not just the Doby, the Dixon, the Crowley, but look at Jesse Gamble. That's a guy that he, knew from his playing days and from the Hill Academy days and all that stuff. Got him to come out of retirement. Got him to come from Toronto out to the West Coast and play and be a big contributor. Look for things like that where we might not be considering it in the moment, and all of a sudden in 6 months we're going, that was a stroke of genius. How'd they do that? Think about it. There are guys, I wonder what the chances are of maybe a guy like Jeremy Noble deciding to come back and play another year. He was a big piece last season. He was the odd man out when Kevin Crowley came in, and then he decided not to play this year anywhere, not in San Diego. Could he be talked into coming back? I don't know if that's on the table at all. I have no information on that, but just looking and trying to connect dots of places where there have been relationships in the past or guys that could potentially fit in for one reason or another. I think look at the margins. Don't look at the big explosive splash pieces. Try and see where can they get better on the fringes. And that's going to be the difference, I think, that takes them from being a really good team that had some pieces that didn't quite fit to a really good team where all of the pieces fit.
1,000% agree with everything you just said. I think it'll be better next year myself. And the best part is they're not going to make any emotional decisions.
No.
Especially when you're smart. Like, you're not going to sit there and say, oh, well, God, we got to run it back, or we got to blow the whole thing up. I like what you said. And I do have to ask you one more question about lax metrics. Anything new in them off thing, or anything we should look at that came out recently?
Not really. We're just kind of wrapping up the season, not really doing any playoff coverage outside of the weekly by the metrics column for Inside Lacrosse. Just kind of tying a bow on it. So keep an eye out in the next week or two for the final stats, final postings, just to get everything out up there and completely updated. There have been a few bugs in some formulas that I've been trying to get sorted out. So as that gets taken care of, less time pressure to keep everything current. I'd say sometime around, June 10th, probably it should all be totally out there and finished and ready to be looked at in whatever way you want to, and that'll coincide, kind of perfectly, I guess, with the season coming to an end as well. So nothing new, just tying a bow on it and trying to finish up another year.
Cannot wait. Thank you, Cooper, for your time once again. It's been a blast. We might have you on before the season ends, anyways, and you enjoy the rest of your day, sir.
You're the best, buddy. You take care. My phone's open anytime.
Absolutely. Cooper Perkins, everybody. Who doesn't love that smile and that insight? That guy's awesome. We're going to take one more break. When we come back, Rock and Bandits. Who wins tonight? We'll let you know. Our last brew presented by B-Res Coffee Company. Code Daily Dive at checkout is coffee for gamers, by gamers, and of course the Crossing Daily Dive fans. Okay, Rock and the Bandits are playing tonight in Buffalo. Buffalo is favored by 1.5, and the total is at 22.5. If Toronto wins, you get a minus 105. I believe Buffalo's going to win. Now, Tom Schreiber is playing, but we are hearing here at Daily Dive he's not 100%. So it's very likely, according to even the Rock Twitter page, post that he's back. He won't be 100% is the word on the Daily Dive streets, okay? That should be a new thing. We're on the Daily Dive streets. That'll make the whole sources thing a little bit easier to say. I'm new. All right. My best bets, let's do the plus money. Let's do minus 1.5. Bandits going to win against a banged up, not 100% Tom Schreiber and The Rock. And I believe it sets up for a great game 2. I wish I could give you my pick for game 2, but I have to see game 1 first. I do believe the Roughnecks win game 2. There's been no odds posted yet for that game, but I'm sure they will be available either tonight or tomorrow. So keep an eye out for those wherever you get your money. But again, Rock and Bandits is tonight. Cannot wait for that. And let's just give one more thing to end this show for the fans at home of the Mammoth, and obviously not the Roughnecks. This is what happened last night, and this will not be a video about the referees. You'll like this one, Calgary fans. I messed that up, but you get it. If you pause that video, you can actually see a referee right. Hold on, let me get to this real quick. That I need to do that. But anyways, if you pause it right about here, oh, that's why the Calgary Roughnecks lost the game. Totally not all this that happened beforehand. Yeah, definitely. If you see it, see right there. Oh boy, let's watch the game for good measure. You can almost hear the referee influencing that shot by Connor Robinson. Just to let you know. The shot. I'm getting fired. Thanks for everyone that tunes into the show. For you guys, and of course for guests like Cooper Perkins, for everyone behind the scenes, this is Dilly Dive. Thanks so much for watching. We'll see you guys Monday. Same time, same place. Enjoy your weekend. Of course, your playoffs. Games 1, of course, tonight. And of course, Game 2's tomorrow. We'll bring it all down Monday. Should be fun. Thanks. Bye.